That for every person who criticizes something vocally, for all you know, there are 10 people who really enjoyed it, but it's, for whatever reason, they're not putting their voices out there. So you can't, if you start listening to every criticism, it'll tear what you do apart, because the criticisms are, many of them, mutually exclusive. There are going to be people who think it's moving too quickly. There are going to be people who think it's moving too slowly. People who think there's too much violence. People who think there's not enough violence. And we make the show that we want to watch.
Okay, so I already made a very lazy review for this episode of Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 3, but I was very unhappy with it, especially after having some time to think about it. And after watching the Inside the Episode documentary, which honestly fucking infuriated me, and oh yes, we are going to get to that, I decided the review needed a do-over, a proper in-depth analysis, as well as voicing my hatred for the showrunners of Game of Thrones, which I've had for quite a number of years. But the original review is still up and will remain up because yes, I'm going to be amending several mistakes and praises that I gave the episode, but it's important to leave the mistake up and not to erase it. I also think the mental process I've gone through, similar to the same mental process I went through after seeing The Last Jedi, is quite interesting to behold and important to learn from, which is why all of my Last Jedi videos, including the ones I'm not proud of, are still up to this day. But my original review was entirely improvised and very rushed, and influenced by emotion, not logic. This video and summary of the episode will be entirely scripted and structured, so rest assured. Now, this is how it's going to go. The first half of this video is me taking a giant steaming dump on Dumb and Dumber regarding the entire show and outlining why they're terrible. The second half is also going to be me taking a giant steaming dump on Dumb and Dumber, but it will be specifically responding to Game of Thrones Season 8, Episode 3. So if you'd like to skip specifically to that, please skip to the time on screen now. Alright, let's get this over with. First, a little background information on my history with Game of Thrones. I love Game of Thrones. I enjoy the shit out of Game of Thrones, but I fucking hate Dumb and Dumber, the producers and writers of the show. I have never liked them. They are the most overrated, egotistical, sorry excuses for fucking talent in Hollywood. They had a fucking treasure trove of excellent source material, which is the intellectual property of George R.R. Martin, the genius behind A Song of Ice and Fire, the book series. A fucking monkey from the depths of fucking Donkey Kong Land could have done a decent job with Game of Thrones. Now, that's not to say they have made a shit series as a whole, but it's become very clearly evident, especially after Season 4, that these two are only competent when they have a fucking book to read from. Because the writing quality of the show has plummeted since they exhausted Martin's decades of hard work. I've wanted to voice my grievances about these two dipshit showrunners for quite some time. Ever since Season 5, in all honesty. It was during Season 5 that I decided to look deeper into the source material, to find why the book readers had become so furious on a number of instances. Now, that's not to say I hated everything about the show since Season 5, but I think we can all agree that Season 5 was the worst, and undoubtedly where things shifted into a new direction. I very much enjoyed Season 6, and I did enjoy Season 7, even though both felt extremely rushed, and Season 7 in particular was a sloppy mess. There was a ton of cathartic fan service in those seasons, especially after the depressing seasons of 1 through 5. Now, I'm not at all against fan service as long as it makes sense, but I'm also not at all against having my expectations subverted, again, as long as that makes fucking sense. Now, I'm not going to have the time to point out every example, so I'm going to go through quickly the ones that bothered me the most. Full spoiler warning for the entire Game of Thrones Seasons 1 to 8 and Episode 3, as well as spoilers for the books A Storm of Swords and A Dance of Dragons. I haven't read either book in its entirety, but I have read specific character storylines in both due to requests from my friends. Now, during Season 5, everyone I knew who read the books told me to look into Tyrion's arc to explain why they resented the show writers so much after Season 4. So I read an online copy of A Song of Ice and Fire's Storm of Swords. I didn't read the full book, just certain parts with certain characters. I read the chapters with the Red Wedding, I read Theon's arc, and I read Tyrion, and unsurprising to a lot of you, I'm sure, it was Tyrion's arc that bothered me the most. As a watcher of the show alone, I found the ending to Season 4 quite cathartic and satisfying, but that's only because I had nothing to compare it to. But now I knew they completely fucked Tyrion into the ground. If you only watch the show and find Tyrion to be a sympathetic character, then it may bewilder you to know that Tysha, Tyrion's wife, wasn't a whore at all. She was actually an innocent commoner girl who loved Tyrion, and Jaime was forced by his father to convince Tyrion that she was a whore, before Tywin made Tyrion watch as his guards raped her, before forcing Tyrion to do the same under this assumption. When Jaime frees Tyrion in Season 4, he confesses this to Tyrion, saying that he owed him for Tysha, and Tyrion tells him that if he ever sees Jaime again, one of them will die. All of this before killing his father and Shae, and Tywin's last words using the word whore weren't referencing Shae, but Tyrion's wife Tysha, telling him, quote, she went wherever whores go, before Tyrion kills him. In the books, Jaime and Tyrion hate one another. Tyrion's storyline was butchered, and this is entirely due to Dumb and Dumber, and their inability to focus on the important characters throughout the series, and focusing more on shock value and stunning the audience to gain a reputation for themselves. Let's talk about the Red Wedding for a moment. So much time was spent building up to that moment, and yes, it was shocking, absolutely very subversive in a good way. And again, that's attributed to George R.R. Martin, not Dumb and Dumber. Where Dumb and Dumber decided to fuck up was by committing way too much screen time to characters which in the grand scheme of things really didn't matter at all. Robb Stark wasn't nearly as important in the books as the show made him out to be. He wasn't a POV character in the books, Catelyn Stark was, and guess what? She's alive and well in the books. But not in the show. She died in the Red Wedding, yes, but Beric Dondarrion brings her back to life in the book. They spent so much time building up Robb's relationship with Talisa, but according to George R.R. Martin himself, Talisa doesn't exist in the books, and Robb marries someone else and gets her pregnant, but it's scarcely mentioned, and she's not even at the Red Wedding. Yeah, that whole oh my god moment where Talisa gets stabbed never happens. Dumb and Dumber just wanted to make a shocking moment for the audience and act like they're so fucking clever while wanking off each other's egos and telling the fans to deal with it. Now, was the Red Wedding a shocking event? Yes. But we are at Season 8. The last time Talisa was even mentioned was Season 3. Does anyone think the amount of screen time she had was justified looking back? Because I sure as shit don't. And the same goes for Robb Stark, and in all honesty, the same goes for Renly Baratheon, and the same goes for the whore Roz. Now, for those three characters I've just mentioned, I haven't read the books for. But this is just based on how irrelevant those characters are right now, in Season 8 of the show. And based on that, yeah, I think those hacks could have trimmed it down quite a bit. Because collectively, Season 7 and Season 8 only have 13 episodes between them, and there's a shit ton to resolve, meaning they have to resort to teleporting characters all over fucking Westeros. I can't help but think they could have teleported some characters earlier in the series, and we'd have more time to flush out the finale instead of rushing it. But what can you expect from two overrated hacks who focus on emotion rather than logic? Now we get to Season 5, and probably the most controversial moment in the entire show for both book readers and show watchers alike, excluding Stannis and Shireen. What we are going to talk about is Sansa's storyline. Now, I'll try and be brief with this one, since I'm sure even the casual watchers know about this. Remember how Sansa was held hostage by the Lannisters for 2.5 straight seasons and experienced one horrific event after another, but she persevered, made her way through, and she bided her time and endured each hardship by that monster Joffrey, who was essentially her captor, who forced her to look at her father's head, had her beaten and humiliated, threatened her life every day. But Peter Baelish rescues her and takes her to the Eyrie, and in the books, that's where she stays. And that, funnily enough, is where Dumb and fucking Dumber ran out of source material and asked themselves, who are we gonna feed to Ramsay's dick? Because this motherfucker's gotta get married to some poor bitch, and Jane Poole is nowhere to be found. Since we spent so much fucking time hovering the camera over Talisa's perfect tits, we don't have a Jane Poole. So now we gotta put Sansa's ass on a fucking platter to have a rape scene that completely derails all the strong character building we've done for her, because Theon needs someone to rescue from fucking Winterfell. If anyone felt it jarring that Sansa was suddenly back in captivity, well, that's because she wasn't even supposed to be there. It was meant to be another character that Dumb and Dumber didn't even fucking bother with. Yeah, there was a payoff in episode 10 of season 6, but still, the audience, myself included, were seething. Sansa was finally out of captivity, and Dumb and Dumber, in the dumbest fucking move ever, tossed her back into captivity. I love Sansa. But why the fuck was she surprised on her wedding night of what was going to happen? She must have known what the fuck happens on a wedding night in fucking Westeros. It's just fucking awful writing. They derailed one of the best built-up character storylines to fill in a writing hole that they didn't even have the fucking foresight to plan for. And what's even worse is when they were called out on this and why they did it, instead of giving a reasonable explanation, or in other words admitting that they fucked up, they decided to, on all accounts that I've seen, either deflected the question by changing the topic of why did you ruin a character's storyline into an argument about how they don't endorse rape, or they'll strawman the audience and say if the violence is too much for you, then just don't watch. I've left a link to a very in-depth video that explains this thoroughly. You can find it in the description and the pinned comment. Another excuse that the writers use for Sansa's rape is she's married this psychopath. How is she going to get out of this rape? She can't. When the real question and massive leap in logic to get to this very specific and shocking moment that they wanted to have, the real question is how can Sansa be so dumb as to willingly put herself in that position in the first place? Because she willingly waltzed into Winterfell under Bolton occupation and married the guy. All because you fucks wanted another edgy scene to brag about in favor of good storytelling, you disingenuous hacks. And then there's ruining Stannis' character with Shireen's death, which makes zero sense in the show, and according to book readers is impossible given where each character is at the end of A Dance of Dragons. So again, well done Dumb and Dumber. Season 7 is full of teleportation bullshit, some of the dumbest plot conveniences ever, such as fishing the fucking ice dragon out of the lake when White Walkers can't swim, and none of those White Walkers had giant chains, and Jon and Daenerys' forced love story, which was predictable as fuck and didn't even make sense given what each character is. If this happens in the books, I'm sure Martin would do a much better job with it. But holy fuck did Dumb and Dumber shit the bed with that. Not to mention Tyrion's relationship with Jaime, and the worst written death for one of the show's main villains, Peter Baelish. Bran could see into the future, past, and present. He's the three-eyed raven and arguably one of the most powerful characters as a result. Yet Dumb and Dumber would rather have him sit silently for a whole season, doing fuck all, and tease some bullshit feud between Arya and Sansa that absolutely no one bought, and would go entirely against both of their characters just to have Baelish's death at the right moment that would suit them. Bran is one of the most poorly written characters I've ever seen. Not to mention they turned him into a fucking bore. When he talks, it's convenient, and he shuts his mouth when it's convenient. Because these two fucking morons can't competently write him in a logical manner since Bran is essentially a spoiler alert on fucking wheels. And these motherfuckers want to shock you above all else. Just like Ryan fucking Johnson. Fuck logic, fuck the characters, fuck effort, just get emotional and suck our dicks is what they want. Fuck Dumb and Dumber. Right, now that we got that out of the way, let's get on to episode 3, season 8. Now to do this, I'm going to go through the Inside the Episode documentary and respond to these fucks point by fucking point, and outline just how retarded these two dumb hacks fucking are. This will be in a very Revenge of the Prequels sort of format, and if you guys don't know what that is, it's a response series I have ongoing. So fans of that, look forward to this. Right, let's take it from the top. Right, you see how it's all dark like that? You see how you can hardly see a fucking thing? Well, guess what? It's not going to get any better.
Whoa! We've been building towards this for so long now. You think back to the very beginning of the very first episode, and it's Beyond the Wall where the White Walkers are stalking a group of rangers. So this is the culmination of one of the key storylines in the whole show.
Yeah, 7 seasons of build-up, you fucking roach. 7 seasons. The first 3 of which you spent on nonsense. 4 and 5 you wasted even more time whilst simultaneously butt-fucking the author. And now this finale or semi-finale, the Great War that you've so lovingly referred to it as numerous times, that you've spent almost a decade building up. You're gonna have to cram it into one fucking episode? Good job. Not to mention, you had only 13 episodes for season 7 and 8. You fuckers really dug your grave and shat in it, didn't you?
And this is for everything. We've been talking for a long time how the Night King's forces have been growing in power and most of the living have been kind of openly disdainful of the threat, and now there's no choice but to fight it.
You turned the Night King into a fucking laughingstock. Good job. The dude's a bitch who never once picks up a sword and uses it. He just looks like some pencil neck little shit who raises his arms anytime someone's about to cut him in half. And yeah, you were building him up as this formidable enemy, someone with presumably eons of battle experience since the Children of the Forest, and you keep teasing the prophecy of Jon Snow, Azor Ahai, and all that shit, explicitly showing the two of them facing each other down like there's going to be some big epic final confrontation between the two. And you have him go out like a little bitch. And yes, oh yes, we will get to that. Fuck you.
I really love the way the first 10 minutes or so plays out because there's so much tension before there's any encounter with the enemy.
Yeah, you also can't see what the fuck is going on. Good job.
You know, as much as they try to conceal it, people are terrified because this is death coming for them. You know, so much of it is just kind of, on one hand, setting the mood for the episode, and the other hand, showing us where these characters are going to be.
The entire episode takes place in Winterfell, and you have 19 or 20 characters all involved in a very chaotic situation that needs many, many locations to service it.
19 or 20 characters. Alright, let's count them up. Ed died like a bitch. Lyanna went out in a cool but pointless over-the-top death scene, and yes, we will come back to that. Jorah bullshits his way to Daenerys somehow and dies fighting for her. Beric goes out like a boss, sure. Theon goes out in a moronic fucking mess, and I'll get to that. That leaves Tyrion and Sansa, that you tease are going to die, and just leave them alone for 10 minutes and pussy out despite the crypts overrun with White Walkers, because the show closes with them very much alive, and without a fucking scratch to show for it. And yeah, I know, I said I loved the tension that scene created, but it served nothing in the end. They should have by all accounts died in that crypt. Am I happy they're alive? Yes. Am I pissed off that Dumb and Dumber executed it so piss fucking poorly? Absolutely. Sam, Jaime, and Brienne are all getting eaten alive outside, and 30 fucking minutes later, they're still getting eaten alive. And get like one line of dialogue each throughout the entire episode. Grey Worm is cool, and so is Tormund, but neither get anything substantial to do. Jon and Dany are inconsistent as shit on their dragons. Bran is fucking useless. The only two characters in this whole thing that I thought were done a service were the Hound and Arya, who just so happen to be my two favorite characters, I will not lie. But don't give us this 20 character bullshit. You don't use 2/3 of them. Fuck you.
Because it's such a long battle in this episode, it's important that we feel the ebb and flow. And so there are moments when you think things are going a little bit better for the living.
Tell them to lift their swords.
We felt like it was important to have that moment of hope when Mel comes in and lights up their rocks and they all ride off into battle.
Remember what I told you guys about shock value? Well, here it comes. Was the torch thing cool? Yes. But the point of it was so fucking stupid.
We wanted our characters to feel like maybe this is all going to work out. Maybe things are all going to be okay.
You mean like just about every other bullshit shock value moment you've shoehorned in where it didn't belong? Like 1-1's death, Barristan Selmy's death, Talisa's death, Marcella's death. Yeah, like we haven't seen that a zillion times, you weasel.
We've seen how devastating a Dothraki charge can be just with their regular swords, and now when they're galloping into combat with flaming rocks, it's what could possibly stand against that? What they see is just the end of the Dothraki, essentially.
They have a plan, and it's important to wait for the Night King to reveal himself and then have 2 dragons against 1 dragon and a really good chance of defeating him. One thing that they couldn't have foreseen was Dany's reaction to seeing the Dothraki decimated. Jon is the person who wants to stick to the plan, but the Dothraki aren't Jon's. They're not loyal to Jon, they're loyal to Dany. And I think that Dany can't bring herself to just watch them die, and so the plan starts to fall apart the second she gets on her dragon, so he does too. And
so you made the Dothraki do something utterly fucking retarded in order to cause an inconvenience for the main characters. That is lazy. You are a lazy fucking hack. They are waiting for the Night King, correct? So why the fuck would they charge him? They've been waging war for centuries in open field. So why would they be dumb enough to charge at 100,000 ice zombies that they can't see, retard? Oh, because we've got to have the torch scene where all the torches flicker out and it has to be emotional and sad, and it's all just so fucking stupid. Yeah, it looks cool. It's haunting. but it makes no sense, you fuck. And yeah, it's to get Danny to do something stupid, but Danny's always been fucking stupid. It would have been more consistent to have Danny doing something stupid rather than that Dothraki charging to their deaths. And you need this for the rest of this shit show to happen. The entire plan fucking up rests on this happening. You both are just so fucking dumb.
And then we take it from there.
We knew this episode was going to be almost entirely battle, and that can get really boring really quickly.
Not if you're invested in the characters and abide by simple logic, you moron.
You can watch it for a certain number of minutes before the effect starts to dampen.
Part of it was making sure that we really stayed focused on the characters, and so whether it's Arya's storyline, or Sansa and Tyrion down the crypt, or Jon Snow and Dany up in the dragons, kind of like all these separate little battles within the greater battle.
Again, you're missing Jaime, Brienne, Tormund, Sam, and Grey Worm. And hold the fuck up, Jon Snow is barely in this fucking episode. He actually does almost nothing. Yeah, he knocks the Night King off his dragon, sure. But what the fuck was the Night King doing this entire time? Why isn't he using his fucking dragon to pave the way for his walkers? He should have exposed himself from the bloody get-go. If the Night King started attacking with fire and forced the Dothraki to charge into his army, beginning the battle and exposing himself, that would have made so much more fucking sense than just the Dothraki committing suicide.
Lyanna Mormont was supposed to be a one-scene character.
Wait, what? A one-scene character? Are you fucking serious? So she was just a one-scene character who had no plot relevance whatsoever. But you saw the memes, right? So you kept her around to make money, didn't you? You fucking did, didn't you? Yeah, I love this character. She was awesome. But that makes what you did to her even worse. Because her life in the story served no purpose, so why would her death? Oh, that's right. Emotion. Shock value. Yeah, fuck you for that too.
And then we met Bella Ramsey and we realized that we would not be doing our jobs if we kept her as a one-scene character.
My mother wasn't a great beauty or any other kind of beauty. She was a great warrior, though. She died fighting for your brother Rob.
We knew that you can't give a big death to everybody who dies in this battle, because which would have been too much. But there also, if she were to die, there was no way to not make a moment of it. So that's where the zombie giant comes in. It just did add a whole level of complexity to that moment that I'm sure a lot of people would have been okay with not having there if we had demanded to cut it. But I think they also understood why we needed to give one of the strongest, smaller people in the show a chance to go out taking down one of the strongest, larger things we've ever seen in the show.
Yeah, Lyanna went out like a beast, but again, she served no purpose. So why did she have to die? It's just meant to be a tearjerker for emotion, correct? And you wanted that David and Goliath poetry bullshit. Here's a question for you, smartass. If she's one of the smallest fighters, why the fuck is she at the gates as the first line of defense? And why doesn't the giant just flatten her immediately? Or strike her with his weapon instead of brushing her aside? Alright, you gotta build tension, blah blah. And bullshit, you can give any character a big death, or at least a decent one. If you're invested in the character and the death abides by logic, the audience will care. Did I care about Lyanna's death? Yes. Did it make any logical sense? No, absolutely not. And yes, Game of Thrones Season 1 to 4, each character, or at least most characters, had consistent deaths that abided by logic. So don't give me the it doesn't have to make sense bullshit.
Any situation where people are fighting, Arya needs to play a central role because she's one of the best at it and she's one of the most fun to watch doing it.
Even for Arya, she can't take on a horde of whites by herself, and especially when her head gets smacked, she's no longer at 100%. It's just about survival at that point.
Otherwise, she's completely unstoppable and she never loses her cool, and that's amazing and it's a lot of fun to watch, but it's one
note, so we decided that almost rewinding the clock on who Arya Stark is to back before she became the sort of magical figure that she's become would really be interesting. It would also give us a chance to change up the nature of the story we were telling.
We talked about Winterfell as kind of the home for the show, and one of the things that always struck us as a horrific aspect of this is that these hallways and rooms where we spend a lot of good times and quiet times with characters that we care about has now become a horror set because it's been invaded by undead soldiers.
Before that point, there's sort of an agoraphobia to the whole thing where you're in this giant, wide open space, and everywhere you look, there's something that could be coming to kill you. Once you get inside Winterfell, everything contracts and the walls literally start to close in around you, and something is there in the dark with you, but you don't know exactly where it is. And we thought that the pace change and the tonal change, it was really important to have that in this episode. Otherwise, the episode would start to feel monotonous.
The horror chase for Arya's survival was handled very well, actually. Probably the best part of this entire episode. I was heavily invested in Arya. Again, one of my favorite characters, my favorite female character, and seeing her vulnerable for the first time since season 6 was refreshing. And seeing the Hound run to her aid was also awesome to see. However, like I said in my original review, why, when Melisandre lights the trench, why aren't the walls already manned? Why the fuck aren't they firing flaming arrow volleys into the White Walker army? Why are the trained soldiers so incompetent that they can't keep the wall's line of defense intact when zombies are climbing it? Zombies who by comparison don't know how to fight and who are physically unable to fight since, well, they're trying to climb a wall. And armed soldiers are waiting at the top who can just stab them in the head and shoot them in the head. Arya can hold a wall segment by herself. So why did I see soldiers getting stabbed because they weren't correctly looking at the wall they're meant to protect, allowing the walkers through? Oh, right, because we need people to once again be idiots in order to create tension. Arya can hold a wall segment competently on her own, but not dozens of trained soldiers? Yeah, fuck off, mate.
Dracarys.
We thought it was important that whatever the plan was, that it not just work out, because that would be kind of dull.
Right, so let's turn the characters into idiots so that it doesn't work out. Logic trumps emotion, dumbass. You don't have to turn people into idiots to create tension.
While there's no reason to know for certain that the fire wouldn't kill or destroy the Night King, there's also no particular reason to believe that it would.
Fuck you, we've seen fire burn whites this whole time. I've heard someone say that the episode of Hardhome showed that the walkers can walk through fire, but I still call bullshit on that unless this is actually in the books. That walker was walking through the flames emitting cold energy to protect itself. The motherfucking Night King got melted with dragon fire, which is very different to just walking through a burning building. Oh, but we need more shock value when it doesn't make sense, so yeah, piss off. How about you just have Dany miss, or just don't have the scene at all?
And then a few moments after this happens, the Night King brings them a whole new, larger undead problem by taking all of their own who have been killed in the course of this battle and turning them into the enemy.
It's a wonder you remembered the Night King could do that. I was asking myself throughout the episode, why the fuck didn't he do it sooner? And I especially wonder if you remember this fool is strong enough to one-shot a fucking dragon when you consider what happens later.
I mean, we talked about various endings for Jorah for a long time, but you think about Jorah, from the very first time we met him, he was with Dany. And from that time, he's been mostly by her side. Part of Jorah's tragedy is that he was in love with a woman who couldn't love him back, but he's accepted that for quite a long time. And at the same time, he was going to fight for her as long as he could and as well as he could.
There had never been a moment where she more needed someone to fight to protect her than this moment. And if he could have chosen a way to die, this is how he would have chosen to die. So it was something we thought would be powerful to give him.
Wait, so that's the reason why fucking Drogon forgot how to fly when it was getting attacked by White Walkers? And if Dany was surrounded, how did Jorah bullshit his way out into the fields to protect her? What is with characters teleporting in seasons 7 and 8? Jorah's death was emotionally impactful, yes, and I don't like giving Emilia Clarke credit, but her acting when he died was actually very good. But this still makes little to no sense. You got the emotion, but you broke just about every rule to get it.
The reason the godswood was chosen is because it's such a source of power for those who believe in the old gods, and for Bran in particular. And so we know that the Weirwood Tree and the Three-Eyed Raven have a very deep connection. That was always the location where Bran was going to be waiting for the Night King.
I just want you to know the things I did.
Everything you did brought you where you are now. Where you belong. Home.
It's not like the show is entirely about people redeeming themselves and then it's all over. But if the canvas is big enough, there are spaces for those redemptive moments.
Again, what the fuck was Bran doing this entire battle? He can see into the future. He can see the past and he can see the present. Why isn't he in a place where he can provide battle commands or where he can just tell Jon where the Night King is since he can see him? Instead, he just flutters about as a bird. He literally says, I'm going to go now, and he just goes and flies off for plot convenience. It's seriously like Dumb and Dumber were like, what should we do with Bran? He can blow all of our clever little surprises that anyone with half a fucking brain can see coming. What should we do with him? Let's just turn him into a bird and speak nothing of it. Great! And that's exactly what they did, because fuck writing Bran in a manner that makes sense, I guess. Like I said, he's extremely inconsistent. He talks when it's convenient and he shuts his mouth when it's also convenient. And he's just so fucking boring. But I'm not done with Bran. I'll get back to him in a moment.
I think what was really important for Theon at the end was hearing that thank you from Bran, because Bran knows what's going to happen.
Theon. You're a good man. Thank you.
He knows he's dead. He knows he's not going to be able to kill the Night King. But I think what's really heroic about his action is that we're all going to die, and we know we're not going to be able to defeat death at the end. But, you know, it's how you face those final moments, and he chooses to run straight at it. And I think he dies in a way that makes us really proud of him and the journey he's gone through.
So Bran knows that Theon is going to die to the Night King. But he can see Arya making her way to deliver the final blow. Why doesn't he tell Theon to hold his ground, to buy him for more time so that he can distract the Night King, so that Arya can finish him off? Not to mention, they are surrounded by White Walkers, and yes, I'll come back to that, but Bran knows Arya will deliver the final blow. So why does he tell Theon that he's a good man and thank you? Right, because again, for the 50th fucking time, they choose emotion over what makes sense. I appreciate the poetry in what Bran was saying for Theon, but there's no way Bran didn't know about Arya. Did he lie to Theon and send him to his death as some kind of payback? Well, Dumb and Dumber just told us that Bran was 100% serious. Though I'm sure they'll cook up another excuse in some later interview or just ignore the question outright and patronize the audience again. If Bran forgave Theon, he wouldn't send him to his death. And don't use the Infinity War, Doctor Strange bullshit excuse.
There was no other way.
If Theon didn't move a muscle, nothing would have changed.
For, I think it's probably 3 years now or something, we've known that it was going to be Arya who delivers that fatal blow.
She seemed like the best candidate, provided we weren't thinking about her in that moment. One of the great things about having this many people you care about in a sequence together is that you can kind of pull people's attention and focus to people that they care about a lot, like Jon and like Dany, Theon and Bran, not to mention Tyrion and Sansa and the Crypt. So you're going all over the place with people who you're desperately worried for, and hopefully you forget about the fact that Arya Stark ran out of that castle with the battle drums playing and going towards some purpose, and we don't know what until it happens.
We hope.
Everyone, absolutely everyone, and their grandmother saw that coming, you untalented hack. I know not being retarded is an entirely new experience for you, but if you took a second to actually think about not having the Red Woman dropping spoilers throughout the entire episode, it might have actually fucking worked. The whole time the Night King was very slowly walking up to Bran, I was just saying to myself, when the fuck is Arya gonna show up? But more importantly, how she would show up. You obviously were counting on the surprise alone, weren't you? Because you completely fucked the surprise, but you also fucked the execution as well. As soon as you had Melisandre say blue eyes, you spoiled what you just said to be a 3-year kept secret. So good job. You're not fucking clever. And if this has been a 3-year setup, that means during seasons 5, 6, and 7, you've had this in mind, correct? That means every instance where you've had this face-down moment with Jon and the Night King, and every single tease and every single prophecy ex machina was all dog shit. Jon Snow's purpose in the battle is minimal at best. Beric Dondarrion's purpose in the battle is minimal at best. And then the Red Woman basically retcons all of the prophecies by like, yeah, I forgot to tell you, yeah, you're gonna kill the Night King. Fuck you, Dumb and Dumber. I'm not mad that Arya delivers the final blow, but the setup is so pretentious and piss poor. Dumb and Dumber are probably jerking themselves off on Twitter right now about how they're geniuses in their own retarded little echo chambers. Rian Johnson would be proud. Oh wait, he is. Fuck you, Ryan.
To kind of avoid the expected, and Jon Snow has always been the hero, the one who's been the savior, but it just didn't seem right to us for this moment. We knew it had to be Valyrian steel to the exact spot where the Child of the Forest put the Dragonglass blade to create the Night King, and he's uncreated by the Valyrian steel. At the end of it, it's a victory for the living, but at great cost because some of our favorite characters fall along the way.
So basically, she kills the Night King because subversion. Not character purpose, just subversion. You failed at the surprise, and the only reason people were surprised at all was because of how utterly fucking stupid the execution was. Arya bullshits her way past dozens of White Walkers that were standing very clearly behind the Night King, which is the direction Arya comes from. Arya materializes out of thin air and kills a villain which you yourselves have built up for almost a decade. A villain who never does anything except show up to die. This fucker can pierce a dragon with his spear, but never ever fights in a battle. Fuck you, Dumb and Dumber. Now I actually like how Arya kills him with the blade. That was a good callback to Season 7. People are saying it was stolen from The Last Jedi, but that's simply untrue. The kill makes enough sense when Arya actually gets caught by the neck, but the Night King was a total pussy. Arya was a deus ex machina that shatters the immersion of Game of Thrones and its dire consequences. And the Great War, which Dumb and Dumber built up over 7 seasons, was a disgrace in execution and a sloppy, rushed fucking mess.
We knew from the beginning, once we handed the outline in, what we were in for. The directors, Miguel Sapochnik, took what we were doing and defined this episode. Miguel did a tremendous amount of heroic heavy lifting on this front. He knew that if the planning wasn't there, we never would have ended up with the consistent excellence that he delivered.
Consistent excellence. I couldn't see what the fuck was happening.
It is to their immense credit that not only that they endured it, but that they did such a great job the whole time they were there.
It's a real testament to the entire Belfast crew who gave us something that no amount of money could ever buy.
You're right, you can't buy talent, Dumber. You certainly can't. I mean, you can buy talented people to work for you, sure. It's just such a shame that HBO hired you instead. Right, now, time to wrap this up. Look, this episode had a lot going for it. The tension was there, as was the feeling of we are all going to die. I said that in my original video, and I stand by that. A lot of these issues I also spotted in my original video, but I was on an emotional high. I didn't think about the consequences in the grand scheme of things. And what this means is seasons 1 to 7 have excessive, irrelevant build-up that leads to a conclusion which is ultimately fucking incompetent and nonsensical. Remember what I said about the Red Wedding? How there was excessive build-up to a climax that is completely fucking irrelevant in Season 8? Well, now the White Walker conclusion has excessive build-up that takes up way too much screen time because the payoff is one retardedly written episode which had to be rushed because Dumb and Dumber spent too much time thinking short-term rather than long-term. And now we got 3 episodes left, and I'm sure I know what's going to happen. Cersei is going to lose, and Jaime is going to try and reason with her, but Bronn is going to kill Jaime with a crossbow, but Tyrion is going to jump in the way and save his life because fuck fans of Bronn, I guess. It's emotionally resonant, that's all that fucking matters, right? Throughout this video, I've outlined countless of examples where Dumb and Dumber threw logic out the window to achieve emotional resonance, and all this Deus Ex Machina bullshit, which is another way of saying we're counting on our invested audience to be stupid. The Night King dying the way he did is equivalent to this, and Arya showing up when she did is equivalent to this. And let's not forget this. I've hated Dumb and Dumber for years. I've wanted to speak up about it for a long time, and unlike many, I've been seething at the fact that these fucking hacks are gonna get their own Star Wars trilogy next, with more source material to ruin and another man's vision to even further run into the ground. These two sicken me and have been for years, and it really fucking annoys me when people defend them, not to mention the egos on these two, pretending like they have some semblance of creative genius when all they've made is an abridged version of A Song of Ice and Fire and butchered the source material. And then to treat their audience like children or invalidate when they raise serious legitimate outrage and criticism of their work. Dumb and Dumber try to subvert expectations for shock value and emotional response, and spit in the face of logic while doing so. It's why I've hated them for years. And make no mistake, Dumb and Dumber were Rian Johnson before being Rian Johnson was a thing. I'm just glad the majority of people see that now, and that these two will go down in history as the hacks that they are when Game of Thrones is finally over.